So now's a good time to take a step back, organize your network, figure out what needs to happen to finish this all up, and also create a bullet point list of things that need to get done. So I've already gone ahead and organized this network. It's really important that you do it because right now this network is getting huge. So for your sake, as well as for anyone else's sake, it's good to get done with a big chunk of the project, go back and organize it, and then move on after that. Also, be sure to label your wrangles if there's anything complicated going on, or not really complicated, but anything that's fairly involved, like this name as an example. And once we do that, we can move on to something else. All right, so what I'd like to do before we get too crazy on the tertiary stuff is I want to, first of all, switch out the ground plane. If I was to say what's bothering me the most right now, it's all of this area along the top of the plates that are perfectly smooth. I really don't like that. And I think that by adding just a little bit of displacement in the topology, it's going to add a lot, especially when it comes to rendering and just changing up the way that light behaves on these top areas right here. So that's going to be the first thing that we do. Also, I think that this is a good time to situate a camera, render out what we have thus far, and then begin to think about, okay, how do we add dust and tertiary stuff once everything else is set up? That's kind of a good way to keep yourself inspired too, by kind of rendering this out and making it look cool first. So to do this, it's really nothing that crazy. I start with a grid. I use this triplanar displace node, which is basically just using a texture map and displacing the geo off of that. This triplanar displace, by the way, is part of the Side Effects Lab toolkit. So you have to have that in order to find this node. But it's pretty sweet because that gives us this. And if you want to find those height maps, I also found this at ArtStation with Jose Vega offering these for free. So pretty awesome. Thanks, Jose. We have that. I take away a chunk of it using this blast. So I like this area because it's really flat and I can just work with that really nicely. I then transform that so it fits the size of the original grid. If we take a look here at all objects, you can see that it fits like so. Then I use the good old camera volume trick. So we basically take this volume, we're using that to mask out where we want to keep the most polygons. We use this set retention attribute. So again, like you've seen before, we gather the volume from this guy. We set the retention. I do a fits right here where I basically take the this value plus 0.1. So if we have our visualize and we take a look at this via a color, we end up with this. And yeah, basically we're just creating a mask. That's all we're doing. I have a mask between 0 and 1, so that's why I'm using a fit right here. But anyway, we do that. We polyreduce. On the polyreduce, the key here is to specify how many polygons you want, and then to go down here and use the retain density by attributes. That's where the retention kicks in. A weight of 10 gives us a topology that looks something like this. So it's just dense where we want it to be dense. After that, I clean, smooth a little bit, set the normals, and that's about it. So then once we do that, we'll have to go through and recache everything out. So I know ideally this should have happened at the very beginning, but it's okay. Not a huge deal. The main thing to do is to make sure that your Boolean planes line up properly. Because we've slightly changed things, we want to be sure that the planes go through all the way and that that's not going to give us any weird geometry as a result. So after doing that, we have this. There's still a piece in the middle here I have to clean up and address, but for the most part, this is working. After doing all that, I ran a play blast and this is what I get. So I have the metaball forces. I timed that so it correlates with the plates popping up. So it feels like we have a tiny bit of lead in action, and then it goes boom. And as you can imagine, that's also where we want to place our smoke effects. So it's really important that we get this to a place where we can now begin timing our smoke effects accordingly as well. So that's why this is kind of like a checkpoint. We want to be sure to lock in this version as much as we can, because the stuff we do after this, some of the stuff, is going to rely on the individual situation, the seeds that you've used across everything. Now, you might have noticed that there's some popping. That is not in the simulation that I have. That is actually due to me combining play blasts. So, in other words, I did a play blast, stopped in the middle, tweaked something, did another one, and that's why you see some popping. Just for the record. But also at this point, I'll talk about cleaning up our geometry after the simulation. For instance, if we look at the bottom left area, you'll notice that we have a little Lone Ranger just shooting out. See, he's right there. So we'll just target some of these points, some of these pieces that just aren't working. And from there, we'll pretty much have the final result. Now, before we get too far, I also think now is a good opportunity to address some lighting. Now, I'm not going to go too crazy on teaching lighting in this course because it is fairly involved. You'll have to spend time doing this. There's no way around it. But the main key here is this ground light. It's basically just an area light that is pretty big. It's shining down on here, and it has a gobo. The gobos make a huge, huge difference. So yeah, this cloudy gobo right here, that's what I'm using, and that's giving us this epic situation happening along the planes here. Again, I might change this camera. I might get rid of the stuff back here. I actually don't come up with the final results at the beginning of each course. I kind of just figure it out as I go sometimes. So in conclusion, we want to get this to a place where it's basically going to be the final results, and then we'll add in some details in the next video.